Washington rental laws outline the rules in the state regarding lease agreements and evictions. We'll examine relevant laws for standard lease agreements, month-to-month lease agreements, and evictions. Standard lease agreement. A standard lease gives an overview of the terms between a landlord and tenant for the renting of property. A standard lease is commonly a one-year fixed period and is the most widely used rental contract. Month-to-month lease. A month-to-month lease, also called a tenancy at will, is an agreement between a landlord and tenant that renews automatically every month and terminates upon notice by either party. In Washington, notice must be provided a minimum of 20 days prior to termination as required by law. Required disclosures. In Washington, the following disclosures must be included as part of the agreement: fire protection and evacuation. The landlord must provide the tenant fire protection and safety information, including an evacuation plan, property smoking policies, emergency notification plans, and routes to exit the building in case of a fire. However, this is not required for single-family homes. Landlord or agent identification. The landlord must give the tenant the name and address of persons authorized to enter the property. This can be listed in the lease or on the premises. If the landlord does not reside in the state of Washington, they must obtain a manager that lives in the country. Mold. The landlord must disclose the tenant information about the dangers of mold as provided by the Department of Health. Move-in checklist. The landlord is required to provide a move-in checklist to the tenant if a security deposit is collected. If no checklist is provided, the tenant is entitled to their entire deposit, no matter the circumstances. Security deposit receipt. The landlord must provide the name and address of the banking institution where the funds are held. In addition, the landlord must provide the terms and conditions for how funds are to be held and dispersed. Non-refundable fees. If the landlord is charging any non-refundable fees, the tenant must be informed. LandLord Access. In Washington, landlords are required to provide 2 days' notice before entering the property for maintenance repairs and 1 day's notice before showing the property to a potential lessee or buyer. Security deposit laws. In Washington, landlords may charge as much as they wish for security. The money must be returned to the tenant within 21 days of vacating. Eviction laws. There are 3 legally accepted causes for eviction in Washington. Non-payment of rent. If the tenant is late on rent, the landlord can issue a 14-day notice to pay or quit, which is also called a demand for rent. This gives the tenant 14 days to pay the rent in full, along with any penalties, or vacate the property. If they do neither, the landlord may be forced to seek an eviction from the court. Illegal activity. If the tenant is engaging in unlawful activity, the landlord may issue a 3-day notice to quit. The tenant cannot cure this violation and must move out within 3 days or face a potential eviction. Non-compliance. If the tenant breaks any portion of the lease other than late rent, the landlord may give the tenant 10 days to comply with the lease or vacate the property.